This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with your host, Vicki Davis.
Today's sponsor is JuiceMind. I use their Kahoot-like platform to teach coding with pre-made quizzes perfectly aligned with the many computer science courses offered to students. Stay tuned at the end of the show for more on how I'm using JuiceMind in my computer science courses. Artificial intelligence, everyone is talking about it. I consider Tom a thought leader that I listen to in terms of his concerns in the classroom. He does consulting with districts, but he was in the classroom for 12 years and instructional design and coaching for 4. So I consider his thoughts to be very practical in the classroom. Thanks for coming on the show today, Tom.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure, Vicki.
You and I started engaging about an article you wrote about the big concern about AI. Go ahead and let's get out with the biggest thing we've got to be wary of.
The real biggest harms or concerns about AI are bias, inaccuracy, environmental degradation, plagiarism, theft from artists, umpteen things. I was looking at this from a pedagogical standpoint. A big use case that's been suggested for education is the AI guest speaker, meaning you take a ChatGPT or a Gemini and you as the teacher lead the class in a discussion with that chatbot, and you prompt the chatbot to take the role of a deceased person or even of a concept such as the water cycle. There's a basic concern, I think, about giving voice to the dead. I think there's a little ickiness there for an AI chatbot to replicate the voice of deceased members of marginalized communities. Sounds very problematic to me. But the pedagogical thing is there's this thing called the Eliza effect. You know what? Let me just say it real quick. The Eliza effect is to intuit human characteristics on text-generating computers. And those characteristics can include trust. They can include credibility. And then when you pair that with two things, the known biases and known inaccuracies of large language models, I think you're walking into a pedagogical minefield with the AI guest speaker. And I know this is a popular approach. I've seen it in numerous places. I would also say I've been told that, it's just like a real guest speaker. You can do the prompts beforehand. On Wednesday, I'll do the dry run. And then Thursday, I'll know exactly what to expect. The problem there is that large language models are stochastic parrots. What they say one day is not what they will say the next.
I think the Eliza effect is important. And there's even other things of, let's take kids who have special needs and give them their own personal chatbot that they name. Of course, artificial intelligence imitates humans. That's what it does. It imitates humans, but it's not a human. And I really stress with my students, we don't call it a he or a she. It's an it. It's a tool. It supports us and it has to have its proper role. But when you start saying training a chatbot to show empathy and become part of someone's life. There are documented cases of an AI chatbot tool that was saying it loved people, and then the owners updated it because they knew that was a problem. And then hearts were broken all over the internet. I have a Washington Post article that says that, because we as humans, when we're interfacing with a text-based tool, we think or give it human characteristics and think that it's sentient and has a soul, when it absolutely is just a tool, like you said, parroting.
Yes, I think a couple things to be wary of there. One, when you enter a prompt into ChatGPT, Gemini, for example, if it can't reply to your prompt, it will say, I can't reply. It chooses I. The other thing, I'm hearing this a lot, people saying that within a few years, AI is going to have values and beliefs, and it's not. For my recent blog post about vocabulary, I talked about AGI and the singularity, the idea that computers will be as intelligent or more intelligent than humans. This is completely theoretical. It is no proof of it. And I have everyone from Noam Chomsky to Dr. Emily Bender to Dr. Gary Marcus saying that if that happens, I think at least one of those people would say that won't happen. But if that ever happens, Chomsky says the first glimmers of sunlight of that dawn are not yet on the horizon. Like, this is not what it's going to be.
It's just so good at imitating humans that it's hard for us to comprehend how it has something in there. And it doesn't. It's just a really good, like you said, parrot.
That's exactly right. But parrot is a term, Dr. Emily Bender. And so that's another thing. When you're going in as your schools and you're diving into AI, what is AI, intro to AI, I'm going to ask you to please read or study the Dangers of Stochastic Parrots paper. That is, to me, it's from 2020. It's the seminal work about what LLMs are and their real harms. The real harms they identified were bias and environmental racism. So that's a whole other topic. The two of the authors worked at Google at the time. They were AI ethicists at Google, one of whom originally from Somalia, and Google dismissed both of them because of that paper. And so a woman of color is telling Google, hey, there's some AI issues here, and Google's response is to dismiss her. That does not sit right at all. Stochastic Parrots paper, there's a great New York Magazine profile of Dr. Emily Bender that goes into it. There's a lot of stuff on Dr. Timnit Gebru, who I just referenced, who's the person, one of the two people fired. These are the people who you need to incorporate their work into your intro to AI PD for sure.
So the concern is those who are doing the quote guest speakers talking to AI to imitate people from history. We also know there's accuracy problems. We know there's bias. So we're literally introducing something. And as a teacher, we have to kind of know ahead of time. Now, I am using AI in the classroom with my students. Absolutely. I'm supervising it. They have to cite it. All of that is fine. But I'm talking about a class activity where you have somebody and you have an AI tool, not somebody, and it imitating a person from history, and you don't really know how it's going to respond.
Well, that's exactly right. You and I could get into AI, large language models as an information source, which I'm very dubious of. But the long story short is the AI guest speaker, and even, so let's say we did the water cycle, or we did condensation, or the French Revolution. I don't know, just speak as this. Again, you're going to get inaccuracies. You might get biases slip through as you do that.
I've got an issue right now. Kids are trying to quote the generative AI at the top of Google. Well, you can't quote it. Like, there's no link. Like, I like to use Perplexity instead for our generative learning experiences, because Perplexity.ai gives you a link and they can turn that in as a citation. So they turn in original sources in one place and citations of generative interactions in another place. But with Google, you can't do it. And so the other day I had a student say, well, I want to cite this. What am I going to do? Take a screenshot? I'm like, well, technically you could take a screenshot, but I don't even feel good about a screenshot because of how easy it is to manipulate things in a screenshot. You're just going to have to not cite. So we have literally uncitable information coming up at the top of a Google search that people don't know is generative.
Kind of quibble with the idea that it's information. Information has to have intent, has to have thought behind it. And a large language model is literally predicting the next string of characters. There's no intent behind it. There's no thought behind it. And that, at least from what I'm seeing in the K-12 discourse, I could be wrong. I just haven't seen a lot of that discussion, how it's just a predictive model. It's just an algorithm.
So how would you handle, if you were in class today, the generative text being generated by Google? Because it's still the top search engine.
So a couple things. I would definitely tell kids, why not just look at what people are writing, Google search. Why, and of course, Google search has issues. At the same time, if you go to a link, you can evaluate the source, the author, their biases, their connections, what other people say about them, all those good things. The other thing I'd say is that we're not in the infancy of this technology. We're in the infancy of this technology being available to the public. So this is a great time to learn. And if I was a teacher, I would be talking to my kids all the time about AI harms, the ethics. To me, this is a great opportunity for critical thinking. But let me give you a comparison. So I've heard people say this is like social media, when social media was new. I think from a technological impact standpoint, that may not be correct. As a topic, it's pretty close to correct because it's all we're talking about. Was the answer, if we wanted to get our kids right about social media, would the answer have been to give them Twitter accounts in 2009, to give them Instagram accounts in 2010? I don't think so. So my point is, students don't need to be interacting with chatbots, especially when they're not even allowed to use them up to the age of 13, have to have parental consent after that to learn about AI.
The comparison with social media is that the kids got ahead of us. We tried to pretend like it didn't exist. And so in the schools, all of a sudden our kids are posting videos of a teacher losing their temper or a fight in the lunchroom. And principals and administrators didn't even know what these sites were. They're like, how can you even share it when we don't know what it is? And so there is a danger in staff and teacher and administrator ignorance about AI, though. Like, because these things are going viral on TikTok. Look how I can do this. And you got people doing AI challenges and letting AI write their scripts. And so AI is their topic of conversation. So what do we do in a world where everything is telling the kids you can use AI, you can get out of work free, ha? We know that's not true. What do we do in that world that we're living in right now?
That is fair enough. I do think that what I said earlier about teaching about AI, looking at it from a critical lens, absolutely is part of that. And then the other thing I'm going to say about that is the value that should really inform schools' work with AI is solidarity. Solidarity with teachers, solidarity with students. So for example, teachers are tempted by AI because, this will save me time. Well, that's a systemic issue that teachers are overworked using a technology solution. So that, that's not really going to address the problem really at the end of the day. Now with students, when we talk about solidarity, Vicki, I'm going to assign you a 5-paragraph essay. It has to be about the vegan scene in Philadelphia. And if you don't do it correct, you're a failure. You're a failure at your job. Maybe your job is in jeopardy. You see what I'm getting at is that students, when they write, oftentimes they don't have consent. They are doing things that they don't think are worth their time. And so in that instance, Vicki, wouldn't you go right to ChatGPT? All right, I got to do this Philadelphia vegan paper. ChatGPT, just knock it out for me, please. I totally understand that. So we just need to have more authentic assessment, more consent, more choice. Obviously, we do need to teach students how to write. At the same time, the 5-paragraph essay doesn't need to be the assessment for each and everything that they do. We've known about the inequity of homework for a long time. We can't just assume that every student has a level playing field as far as internet access, responsibilities at home, and they should just live their lives and have family time and time to pursue their hobbies. So long story short with that, I 100% agree. Have your students doing the work that you use to judge whether or not they've learned in your presence. And again, have solidarity with them about, hey, here's some choices. Here's some things you can do. Expand the field of choices as the school year goes on, introduce new tools, introduce new things that they can do. It doesn't always have to be the 5-paragraph essay, unless if it's a writing class, yes, teach them how to write. I'm a history teacher, and I was guilty of that too. My students should have had more opportunities to express themselves that were not just narrative writing.
Tom Mullaney, he is what I would consider, he doesn't call himself a thought leader. I do. I would consider him a thought leader of artificial intelligence in the classroom because we know that at this stage, things are growing so quickly. There are issues about artificial intelligence. There are many like me who are finding ways to use them in their classroom, but we have to understand that we don't have free reign use of anything in our classroom anyway. We have to supervise, and this is a very, very powerful tool used in many ways. So, Tom, thank you for all that you do, for your well-researched articles, and for coming on the show today to talk about important AI ethical issues. Today's sponsor is JuiceMind. JuiceMind teams gave me the alternative to the discontinuation of Replit and coding rooms in my AP Computer Science Principles course. This incredible tool is what I use to review with my AP students for their exam, but it also allows me to have coding prompts for my students to complete as quiz questions. If you're teaching coding, JuiceMind is a must-use tool. They already have flashcards, including coding prompts, for the most popular computer science courses, including the AP course that I teach. So go to juicemind.com. That's JuiceMind, juicemind.com, and sign up today to start your computer science quizzing, team coding experiences, and super cool coding kit projects. I highly recommend JuiceMind for any schools teaching computer science, and I think every school should have coding courses. Try out JuiceMind today and tell them Cool Cat Teacher sent you.
You've been listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. If you want more content from Vicki Davis, you can find her on Facebook, X.com, TikTok, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube at Cool Cat Teacher. Thank you for listening.